So, over the last few months, I've been monitoring Uber's new surge experiment in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've also been monitoring Lyft's new heat maps, which is basically new primetime experiment in Tampa Bay. And the reason I've been monitoring this is because my suspicion is that, they aim to use this as a way to roll out to the rest of the country in order to have more control over how drivers drive, to make their systems more efficient, but also to capture more of the fare. So the first thing I went and did when Uber and Lyft announced that they were expanding these tests is that I reached out to drivers and I started collecting their fares from all the surge and all the prime time that they'd given over the last couple months. Now, obviously, it's hard to get data like this because I am a guy on the internet asking these drivers and to volunteer their information, and that required logging in and basically going in and getting every single primetime trip, every single or heat maps trip, and every single new Uber surge trip over the last 6 months. So I'm going to jump in right now to what we found and how this all works. Surge. So real quick, new surge is you get Uber replaces the hexagons with a set dollar amount. You drive into it, it sticks to you. You get like an extra $2 for every ride, and this replaces the classical like 2x multipliers. Lyft's experiment, they call it heat maps. I'm just going to call it new primetime to keep things simple, and it works almost exactly the same way. Replace hexagons with squares. Replace Uber with the name Lyft. All right, on to the next. So, how much are Uber and Lyft making from penny surge, aka new surge, aka heat maps or new primetime? Well, I went and I got data from drivers who have been driving in Tampa for Lyft's new primetime, and a driver who's been driving in Charlotte, North Carolina for Uber's new surge. And I collected all their trips that they've been had available all the way back as long as these have been deployed. But for Lyft, we find that they are losing money right now on their new primetime experiment, aka heat maps. And the driver made a total of $803.96 with an average of $15.46 per primetime trip. The riders only paid a total of $677.97. Lyft lost $124.81. So this kind of leads me to believe a couple things. So for starters, we just don't have enough data to like conclusively like characterize all of this yet. But this kind of looks a lot like Lyft is actually subsidizing their new primetime model in Tampa. And if I were to make a guess, it's probably because they just need to test it, right? So they're actually spending money to have probably these zones that like are paying out to the drivers to see how drivers react without actually charging the passengers prime time or whatever it's called, heat maps. Now, Uber's Charlotte, North Carolina test for new surge is a completely different story. Of course, Uber knows how to make money, so they've made money on the vast majority of their rides under new surge. So we got 79 examples going all the way back to December. And Uber only lost money on 9 of them. So they made money on 70 of the 79. And they've made a total of $362.73. The riders paid $1,268 total. Driver made $903.73. So under a new surge across 79 examples in Charlotte, North Carolina, we find that Uber ends up taking 28.6% of all of that pot, and then the driver gets 71.4%. Still not great. I think it should be 20/80, but that's kind of on par with like what we're seeing under upfront pricing nowadays. Now, obviously, this is all subject to change, and we don't know what it'll look like, 6 months or a year from now as things kind of get feathered out, right? And one thing I wanted to also kind of cover here is that it feels often like Uber's taking a lot more than they are from each fare, because when I broke it down by the percentage of the fare in which Uber took across all 79 trips, we ended up finding that, Uber took more than 40% of the fare in 23 of 79 new surge trips, and they took more than 30% of the fare in 38 of 79 new surge trips. So from a driver's perspective, when you're going through each trip detail and you're coming across, you're trying to mentally take a look at how much Uber's taking, look at like almost half of your trips are these cases where Uber's taking above 30% of the fare. So it kind of becomes, you know, easy or we remember the times that we've been kind of like lost or burned more than we won. And I think that's kind of playing a part in like thinking like Uber's taking an exorbitant amount of the fare across all rides. Now we did find that of about 7 rides here, Uber took more than 50% of the fare, as high as what appears to be about 75% of the fare. And for what it's worth, I've removed tips from all these calculations. So on Lyft and Uber, all the tips have been pulled out. We're not counting tips in this. We're counting money paid by passengers, money paid to Uber, and money paid to drivers. Anyways, so that's why I think it looks like it hurts a lot more. Another point to take away from this is that like we didn't get any like really long unicorn rides in this data, so that would obviously look different. So why do we still hate new surge and heat maps? Well, most of the drivers I talked to last week, I talked to about 40 drivers. Almost all of them felt like involuntary test subjects, and that was kind of relating to like this feeling of like powerlessness that we often have as drivers, where Uber and Lyft kind of just like roll stuff out without giving us a heads up or deciding randomly to experiment with 50% of your driver population like your Thanos. So, you know, like for Lyft's example, in Chicago, you know, drivers went out to drive on Monday morning and Lyft was like, congratulations, you've been selected for a beta test, you know, to 50% of the drivers. So 50% of the drivers were on this new primetime heat maps thing and 50% were on the old style. The old style had a bunch of primetime because the maps were working. The new style, the maps, there was a bug or something, and there was no primetime showing up all day. So 50% of those drivers just didn't get paid primetime for any of their trips, and they just lost. You know, so like they didn't opt in or to be like experimented on. They just lost money. You know, basically because of some crappy like product that got shipped, like and didn't work. Anyways, another reason we really hate this is because unicorn rides are dead. So unicorn rides are when we get like 1, 2, 3x surge. Well, I guess we don't want 1x. You get like 2 or 3x surge or 4 sometimes, and it's a long distance ride. We make like $150 or $200, right? Like in this case, though, under the new program, we're seeing that, you know, a passenger can still pay up to $108.97 that Lyft would receive, or Uber in this, Lyft or Uber would receive $66.47. Keep in mind, it works the same for both companies, right? I'm not singling one company out over the other. But like then the driver only would make $42.50. Now this is probably, I'm guessing is like maybe on a 2.5, just off the top of my head, based off the ratio of what the driver made versus what Lyft collected. But you know, as the surge goes up and the distance gets longer, then you see more of these insane sort of take rates where, you know, Uber or Lyft are making more than 100, $150 per ride. And until that changes, I'm not giving any long distance rides. And if I get a ride and I'm only going to get paid $2 to $5 to go, you know, 100 miles, and I know it's surging, I know my passenger probably is what put in that they're going to pay 150 to $200 to get home. But I'll just say, listen, I'm not going to do your ride now, but if you wait 15 or 20 minutes, that prime time or surge is going to go away, and you're going to save like at least, you know, like 50% on this ride. So I'm going to cancel. You're going to wait 15 minutes and call again. Goodbye. I move on and do more trips, and hopefully I get more surge and prime time on that smaller situation. And the passenger saves money. The only people who lose are Uber and Lyft because they deployed this system without like no guilt. I have no guilt about it. Now Uber has kind of realized this, and they've seen like these long distance fares where drivers are losing a lot, and they have, you know, committed to like kind of retool that so that the driver never so that Uber doesn't ever end up taking more than 50% of a fare. And I do have a driver who has told me that he's been getting his fares adjusted whenever they do go above 50%. You just submit a fare review or whatever in the app, and he's been getting them fixed in his favor, like all of them. So if that happens to you, submit it in the app, try to ask for like Uber to change the fare, and they might do it. Now Lyft, since their experiment is newer, it's only been out for 3 months, whereas Uber's experiment's been out for like almost 9 now. Lyft hasn't wised up, but they'll probably end up making a similar change. So yeah, right now, if you get called into one of Lyft's new primetime zones or heat maps and you're not already in there, but you get a request from within it, then you don't get any bonus. So you lose out on that. Lyft is probably going to change that. But until they change that and fix it, then I recommend logging off, driving into, let's say you're driving here, drive into the heat map, and then log back on so you know you're going to get a bonus. All right. Now, I was trying to test if perhaps Lyft or Uber were charging passengers prime time without passing that on, or Surge without passing that on to the driver. But what I actually found in the case of Tampa was that Lyft was paying prime time to drivers, or a bonus, $15.50 to this driver without charging passengers. So basically, this is like, I don't want to say it's fake prime time, but it's like it's like a heat map where the drivers get paid a bonus, but the passengers don't pay. So that's why Lyft is probably losing a lot of money. They're just trying to test out the maps, so they're just spending some money to see how drivers behave under this test. Long story short, I took this screenshot here. Driver took this screenshot. I monitored it for about 10 minutes. We were doing it at exact same time. Never once did I get charged any prime time, and my pin came right where that blue dot is. So he got paid. I wasn't going to pay. Lyft was going to lose money. So they're probably just testing it out. We don't know how this is going to play out in the long run. We don't know if we're going to end up making more money or less in the long run. It's still being tested. There's still a lot going on here. So another thing I wanted to kind of end with is that, for the last couple of years, we've been mentally trained to just go out and get these long unicorn rides, right? So, now that that's changing, like, that's like a really big deal. Like we really kind of planned a lot. And personally, when I drive, I usually drive for like 8 to 10 hours. And most of my rides kind of like the pay kind of sucks, and then I get 2 to 3, or maybe if I get lucky, I get like 5 surge or primetime rides. And that ends up making up for a lot of like the crappy rides I gave throughout the day, So that's like it's a big part of like a lot of our income. So finding out that we're not going to, that's at risk, then like it takes away from a lot of the fun part of the job. It takes away from like one of the most rewarding part of the jobs when, you end the ride and you see that you've earned that much money. Like that's a big deal. So there's more change to come. They're still trying to figure out like, how it's going to work in the end. But I'm pretty sure this is just going to get rolled out to the rest of the country because it just gives them a lot more flexibility, ability to kind of manipulate things. If you want to submit any feedback to Uber on the new surge, you can click here in the article. I'll leave a link in the description. And if you want to submit any feedback to Lyft on their new primetime, click here. But until then, keep an eye out for this. And if you want to, send in your data or volunteer for that 6 months down the road, email me, Christian@thrideshareguy.com, and we can take another look at how much Uber and Lyft are making off of new primetime heat maps or new surge. But until then, I'm Christian with the Rideshare Guy. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notes, the notifications, and whatnot. Keep your eyes on the road, your hands on the wheel, and your wheels on the ground. Until next time, take it easy.